Imagine this. Soft morning light streaming into this perfectly tidy kitchen. There's a woman. She looks really calm, maybe wearing a floral dress, and she's, kneading dough. Artisanal sourdough, naturally. The smell of baking bread is just starting. Nearby, her kids, perfectly dressed, are playing quietly, maybe with wooden toys. Everything just gleams. It feels like, well, a throwback, doesn't it? A picture-perfect ideal.
It really does. It's a very distinct image.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're unpacking that exact image. Because it's more than just a pretty picture, isn't it?
Much more.
This is the world of the Tradwife, shorthand, of course, for traditional wife. It's a huge social media trend, a lifestyle choice that sparks some really intense conversations. Online, sure, but everywhere.
Absolutely.
And we're going to go, way beyond just the surface, beyond that charming, often very carefully curated aesthetic. Our mission today is to really understand what this whole phenomenon means. For individuals, yes, but also for society. We'll look at why it's appealing, dig into the criticisms, the risks, and think about what it all implies.
That's right. This isn't just about what scrolls past on your feed. It's about these deeper currents, a major cultural discussion happening right now.
So we're diving into the nuances, the good, the bad, the complicated.
Exactly. The glowing portrayals that draw people in, but also the stark realities that often get missed. And to do that, we've pulled together a really wide range of sources.
Yeah.
We've got academic critiques, like from the Cornell Daily Sun, Psychology Today, philosophical takes from the blog of the APA, but also really raw, unfiltered discussions from places like Reddit, the Tradwives, and Rask Feminists threads.
Okay, so real voices too.
Yeah, balancing that with mainstream reporting from, say, people.com. It gives us, and hopefully you, a really comprehensive view of something that's, well, much more complex than it looks online.
Okay, let's unpack this then. When we hear Tradwife, what's the sort of immediate surface-level idea most people get? Because there's that visual, but then there's usually more underneath.
Well, at its most basic, it's pretty straightforward. It means a woman who consciously chooses to practice conventional gender roles, usually thinking back to the mid-20th century, maybe.
Okay.
So a strong focus on domesticity. People.com points out it almost always involves the woman as the main homemaker, the caregiver, and the man as the primary or maybe sole breadwinner.
A very clear division of labor. Like, this is your job, this is mine.
Exactly. A deliberate step back to what's seen as an older, maybe simpler, supposedly more harmonious way of living.
And it's interesting because traditional can look different, can it? People.com mentioned that. You might see this sort of 1950s Mad Men perfect housewife vibe.
Right. The coiffed hair, the dress.
Or maybe something more like 19th century homestead. Canning, baking from absolute scratch.
Yeah, that rustic aesthetic. But despite those style differences, the core idea, as the article says, is unmistakable. It's about that specific set of roles, very defined.
Okay, and that leads us straight to social media, where this really lives and breathes, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. That's where the aesthetic is king. On TikTok, on Instagram, you see this incredibly curated, almost hyper-real lifestyle content.
It's not just daily life.
No, it's a performance. Yeah. It's an idealized narrative, carefully constructed, domesticity as an art form almost.
Right, making dinner look like a Renaissance painting. And there are some huge names driving this, people who've built massive followings. Nara Smith, for example. She's only 23, a model. And she portrays motherhood as, well, frankly lavish. Her marriage is presented as incredibly sweet, and she's credited with really pioneering this ultra-curated style, like that video making Coca-Cola from scratch.
Wow, I saw that. Huge numbers.
Over 32 million views. For making Coke. It's kind of astonishing.
It really is. And then there's Hannah Neeleman at Ballerina Farm, mother of 8, Utah farm life, very picturesque. The Sunday Times featured her.
Right, and another huge presence.
But what's interesting about her, and adds complexity, is she's actually said she doesn't identify with the Tradwife label herself.
Oh, really? Despite being like the poster child for it in some ways.
She sees her family as traditional, sure, man, woman, kids, but she feels they're also paving new paths. Suggests maybe a more modern take on her traditional choices.
That's fascinating, walking that line. Then you have others, like Estee Williams. She's got hundreds of thousands of followers, too. And she's much more direct, defines it explicitly. A woman who prefers to take a traditional or ultra-traditional role. including beliefs that a woman's place is in the home.
Right. So for some, it's very much an explicit identity, a public stance.
And this brings us to a really critical point, doesn't it? How these influencers actually make money from this.
That's absolutely crucial because the Cornell Daily Sun points out they monetize this domesticity. Sponsored posts, brand deals, merchandise, they turn their lives into businesses.
So being a tradwife or looking like one isn't just a lifestyle choice for them.
Not just, it's fundamentally, as the article says, a product they sell.
Wow. Selling the lifestyle itself.
Yeah, and the critique is that this commodification creates this unattainable standard. It presents a fantasy, a beautiful, calm, productive home life that most people just can't replicate.
Because it takes immense privilege, time, money.
Exactly. Resources most people don't have. Meanwhile, the influencers profit from this illusion that anyone could achieve it if they just tried hard enough or bought the right things. It's a key critique.
Okay, so beyond the aesthetic, the business side, we need to talk about the ideology, because it's not just about appearances, right?
Not at all. Researcher Mariel Cooksey nails it when she says it's part aesthetic and part ideology. There are specific beliefs underpinning this.
Beliefs that People.com says encourage things like chastity and submissiveness, trading feminist empowerment for a more patriarchal view.
That's often the framework, yes. It's frequently positioned as a direct counter to modern feminist ideas.
And sometimes it goes further. The APA blog mentions some influencers, like Alina K. Pettit or Gwen Swinnerton.
Yes, this is significant. They apparently deploy the aesthetic appeal of traditional femininity, the pretty dresses, the calm demeanor, as a means to make alt-right political ideologies and fundamentalist religious doctrines more palatable.
Wow. Using the aesthetic as a sort of sugarcoating for harder-line views.
That's the argument. It can involve framing the lifestyle as a direction from God, maybe referencing the Proverbs 31 mentality. Religion is often deeply intertwined.
And sometimes it gets pretty aggressive. The Reddit discussions you mentioned.
Yeah, on Ask Feminists, there were mentions of some tradwives explicitly calling feminists agents of Satan or similar. It shows how deep and sometimes hostile the ideological lines can be drawn.
That's pretty intense, especially contrasting with the soft visuals. It really shows this isn't just about personal preference for some. It's a movement with real political, religious edges.
And its origins are telling, too. People.com traces the term tradwife back to an anti-feminist Reddit page, Red Pill Women, from 2013.
Red Pill Women. I know the male Red Pill forum has a pretty toxic reputation.
Exactly. It's described as the female version of that male-dominated, often highly misogynist forum. So understanding that origin point helps contextualize the ideology some adherents might hold. It didn't just spring out of nowhere.
Okay, so we had the definition, the aesthetic, the business, the ideology. But why? Why is this appealing now?
Yeah.
In a world with supposedly more options for women, why choose this path? What's the draw?
It's a really complex question, and the sources give us a few angles. Many women who identify as tradwives genuinely report feeling a deep sense of fulfillment, purpose.
It makes them happy.
Yeah, for them it's not a retreat, it's a source of real satisfaction. The Reddit threads offer some direct insight here.
Like Kato Gizzle on Tradwife.
Exactly. She's 27, Christian, from the U.S. She says, point blank, I am happiest when my house is clean, I'm dressed up, and there is something baking in the oven.
Compared to her career, which she found
boring and unrewarding. Felt like a slave, even though it paid well. She finds her tradwife life extremely fulfilling, finds value in things like crochet, painting things not measured in money.
And interestingly, she said she became a tradwife before converting to Christianity.
Yeah, that detail really challenges the idea it's always religion first. It suggests a personal search for meaning that led her there, then maybe religion reinforced it.
Okay. And other Reddit users echoed that feeling of fulfillment.
Someone else mentioned their favorite part is filling everyone's love cups. Time, food, connection, acts of service. A deep satisfaction from nurturing.
And doing well-listed benefits too, right? Like stronger family bonds.
Yeah. Stronger family relationships, more quality time with kids, especially when they're young, and crucially reduce stress from juggling multiple roles, that pressure point for modern women.
Trying to do it all.
Exactly. So for some, it's a very conscious choice for what feels like a better quality of life.
And sometimes it's practical reasons too. K-Dog Gizzle mentioned wanting kids but not wanting daycare.
Right. For her, staying home just made sense. Another Redditor said they sort of fell into it. Husband took paternity leave. Her contract work dried up during COVID.
So circumstances played a role. It wasn't necessarily a big ideological decision at first.
It can start that way. a pragmatic response that then becomes a more intentional lifestyle.
Okay, but beyond the personal reasons, psychology today talks about bigger social forces at
Yeah.
play, right? Things pushing women towards this.
Yes, this is critical. It's not just happening in a vacuum. External pressures, societal structures,
Yeah.
they shape these choices.
This is where it gets really interesting, connecting the personal to the systemic, like the lure of financial security.
Definitely. Psychology today highlights the promise of being financially cared for. That can be incredibly appealing, especially when, long-term financial security feels shaky for a lot of young people.
When the career path feels uncertain, maybe having a provider seems like a safer bet.
It can look that way. And a big part of that uncertainty comes from what the article calls a hostile labor market.
Hostile how?
Well, many young women saw their mothers, maybe older relatives, really struggle. Unequal pay, fewer opportunities, the constant stress of trying to parent as if they don't work and work as if they don't parent.
That impossible balancing act.
Exactly. And society often fails to provide the support systems. Affordable childcare, forget it for many. Sick child backup. Flex time, good part-time work with benefits. Paid family leave, often lacking.
So even if women are well educated, they see these huge hurdles.
And they might rationally think, is employment even worth the effort? Especially if the financial and emotional payoff seems low compared to the huge personal cost.
That's a powerful point. Societal failures pushing people towards traditional roles. And there was another point about the lack of a social safety net.
Yes, particularly in the U.S., Psychology Today mentions sociologist Jessica Clarko's line. While many other countries have social safety nets, the United States has women.
Wow. Meaning women pick up the slack.
Pretty much. Young women see their mothers, aunts, doing huge amounts of unpaid caregiving kids, elderly parents, disabled relatives, often sacrificing their own careers or scaling them back massively.
So faced with that reality.
Seeking a financially secure partner who allows them to focus on that domestic sphere might seem less like a romantic dream and more like, as Psychology Today puts it, a rational calculation, a survival strategy.
So if we connect all that,
Yeah.
how much is this choice truly free, and how much is a response to these very real challenges? Makes you think, doesn't it?
It really does. It forces you to question the very nature of choice when the options themselves are shaped by these bigger forces.
Okay. So we've looked at the appeal, personal fulfillment, societal pressures. But this isn't without criticism. There are significant risks. Let's get into that. The whole choice feminism debate seems central here.
It really is. The idea that any choice a woman makes is automatically feminist just because she chose it.
But critics push back on that.
Hard. The Cornell Daily Sun, talking about influencers like Nara Smith, argues they expose the hollowness of this idea. Yes, their lifestyles are chosen, but the choices exist within this very narrow frame. Privilege, wealth, traditional gender roles.
So the choice itself might reinforce the very structures feminism seeks to dismantle.
That's the critique. If your choices only lead back to reinforcing the status quo, how empowering is that choice, really?
Which brings us to the more philosophical angle from the APA blog, using Simone de Beauvoir's concept of the other. Can you break that down for us? It sounds complex.
It is a bit dense, but the core idea is powerful. Beauvoir's other is someone lacking true existential freedom because they don't pursue what she called meaningful projects or transcendent activity.
Transcendent activities being.
Things that expand the self beyond just immediate survival needs. Think creative work, intellectual pursuits, political action, science. Things that create new meaning.
Okay. And contrast that with?
What she called imminent activities. These are things like housekeeping, childcare, the daily grind of maintaining life. Necessary, absolutely, but focused on physical survival and biological continuation, not necessarily self-expansion.
So the connection to Tradwives is?
If the lifestyle heavily emphasizes only those imminent activities, often excluding the transcendent, it mirrors Beauvoir's idea of womanhood as the other. Your existence is defined mainly by your relation to others, wife, mother, homemaker, not as an independent self pursuing unique goals.
Which leads to the critique that it's anti-feminist, reinforcing an oppressive view of women.
Exactly, because it potentially limits that existential freedom, that personal growth. It raises the question, is your life primarily for you or for others?
That's a heavy critique. But what about the choice element? Can women autonomously choose these roles, even if they seem oppressive from an outside perspective?
That's where it gets even more nuanced. Philosophers like Menon Garcia suggest women might passively consent to being the other, Why? Because the social cost of pursuing real freedom, defying expectations, financial struggles, maybe being ostracized is just far too high. It's less an active choice, more a pragmatic calculation.
The path of least resistance, maybe?
Or, as Charlotte Knowles suggests, some might actively choose it to avoid the sheer anxiety of creating a life without a script. Freedom can be terrifying. Following a defined path, even a limiting one, can feel safer than carving your own.
So external pressures, internal anxieties, they complicate the idea of a purely free choice.
Definitely. And beyond the philosophy, there are very concrete, often devastating risks, especially financial ones.
Right. Psychology Today and Doing Well both hammered this point. Considerable financial risk.
The stats are stark. Divorce rates, 35–50%. And a woman's household income, it drops about 41% after divorce, on average. That's huge.
Catastrophic, potentially.
Absolutely. Then, widowhood. 1 million U.S. women widowed each year. Suddenly managing everything alone, often after years, decades of dependence. Plus, things like substance abuse and a spouse that affects nearly 47 million Americans, potentially wrecking family finances.
And these crises hit harder if the woman lacks job skills.
Precisely. If you've been out of the workforce, you lack current job skills and experience, making it incredibly hard to recover financially.
And Doing Well also mentioned limited financial autonomy even within the marriage.
Yes. Giving up paid work means less say. Makes it harder to leave an unhappy situation, harder to support yourself, and long-term, reduce retirement savings, lower Social Security. It affects your whole life's security.
It's not just about daily bills, it's decades down the line.
And there's the identity aspect, too. Doing Well notes some feel a loss of personal identity and self-worth when they give up a career. Your whole world shrinks.
And Psychology Today talked about a loss of control over money.
Yeah, the asymmetry. One breadwinner means they often hold the power over spending, saving. The dependent partner might not even know the full financial picture, kept in the dark.
That sounds terrifying. And it leads to learned helplessness.
It can, yeah. Psychology Today explains it. Women removed from finances never learn to make financial decisions and manage money. They wouldn't know how to handle taxes, investments, maybe even basic bills.
So if they're suddenly alone,
They feel completely helpless, overwhelmed. It's a dangerous dependency, strips away your agency.
and this dependency, it's exactly what feminism fought against, isn't it?
Precisely. Psychology Today reminds us feminism emerged because women felt powerless and unhappy being dependent on men. It was about seeking autonomy.
We have to remember the reality behind the nostalgia, too. The idealized 1950s.
Had some grim realities, like marital rape was legal in many places for much of that era. The trade-off for reduced daily stress can be, for some, boredom, lack of fulfillment, or worse, abuse.
And financial dependence traps women in those situations.
Sadly, yes. Psychology Today is clear. Many get trapped in abusive relationships because they literally can't afford to leave. No independent resources.
And it's not just women facing downsides, right? Men in these traditional roles face challenges, too.
Absolutely. The traditional breadwinner can become inept at domestic tasks because they've never had to do them, referring to childcare as babysitting.
Oh.
If they get divorced, they can be totally unprepared and overwhelmed by household management, and the role often separates fathers from their children, leading to regret later. That's why some places, like Sweden, push paternity leave so hard.
To keep dads connected.
Yeah. And the pressure on the man? It's immense. Supporting everyone can be exhausting and stressful. Men might stay in jobs they hate for decades because they feel they have no choice. It's a heavy burden.
The asymmetry cuts both ways, then. Different risks, but limitations on both sides.
Definitely. Which brings us to a really crucial distinction that gets blurred online, especially on Reddit, like in Rask Feminists.
Okay, what's the distinction?
A tradwife is not the same thing as a stay-at-home mother, as I am. This is vital.
Why is that distinction so important?
Because being a serovem is primarily a financial and logistical choice a couple makes. And as Redditors point out, that choice can be totally compatible with feminism if it's freely chosen without ideological baggage.
Okay, so the difference is the ideology.
Exactly. Tradwife ideology, as users explain, often includes the belief that women are naturally suited to childcare and men to work. It's essentialist.
Meaning women should be home because it's their nature, not just their choice.
Right. It removes genuine freedom and imposes a script based on supposed inherent gender traits. That's fundamentally anti-feminist.
And the critiques of those pushing the ideology, they come from other women too.
Often, yeah. Accusations of bashing equality and autonomy, of performing traditional femininity not just for themselves, but as a requirement for all women.
Trying to impose it on others.
Right. Terms like internalized misogyny come up, or the crab bucket mentality pulling down other women who try to achieve independence, or being pick-me's, seeking male approval by conforming.
And there was that point on Reddit about traditional roles being a historical myth.
A powerful one, that the 1950s housewife ideal never even existed in reality for most people, only a tiny upper-middle-class segment. Historically, women always worked. Fields, factories, family businesses, home production.
So the tradition they point to isn't even historically accurate for most.
Often not. It's a very specific, limited, often white, affluent, post-war snapshot presented as a timeless norm.
Okay, so back to choice feminism. This distinction is key. Feminists support the right to choose.
Absolutely.
But not all choices are necessarily feminist choices, especially that they reinforce oppression.
Exactly. As one Redditor put it, if a woman wants to be trapped in the home as an indentured servant, she's welcome to make that choice, but that's not a feminist choice. The issue arises when tradwives try to virtue signal or push their choice as the only right way for all women.
It's the proselytizing that draws the fire, moving from personal life to ideology.
Precisely. Which leads us to our final part, navigating this. How can those choosing this path protect themselves? And what are the bigger implications?
Right. For those who do choose this, for whatever reason, doing well had practical advice, didn't it?
Yes. Concrete steps to mitigate those financial risks we talked about. Really crucial stuff.
Like what? Communication first.
Top of the list. Communicate with your spouse about financial expectations. Get on the same page. Understand the risks together. Then actively review financial assets. Retirement accounts, life insurance, savings. Know what's there.
And life insurance is key.
Vital. Get policies for both spouses. Make sure you are named beneficiary on your spouse's policy. Regularly check the coverage amount. And consider a prenup. Uncomfortable, maybe, but practical, especially for protecting your interests if things go wrong.
Okay. And staying prepared. Maintaining options.
Yeah. Taking online courses or certification programs, keep skills current, keep options open for remote or flexible work later, and actively educate and improve your financial literacy. Understand budgeting, investing, retirement planning. Knowledge is power, even if you're not earning.
So you understand the landscape.
Exactly. Maybe find some income sources like freelancing or starting a home-based business. Maintain some independence and save and invest for emergencies and retirement, even small amounts. A Roth IRA is an option for non-working spouses.
And practical things like wills. Emergency binders.
Yes. Make sure you're in the will. Create a family emergency binder, bank logins, insurance details, all that vital info accessible to both. Okay. It's about building that personal safety net.
Incredibly important steps for anyone in that situation, really.
Okay, let's zoom out one last time. Beyond the individual, what about broader feminist goals? How does this tradwife trend interact with those? The APA blog puts it clearly. Feminism isn't just about supporting individual choices. It's fundamentally about changing oppressive social structures and practices so everyone has equal opportunities, regardless of gender.
So the goal isn't just freedom within the current system, but changing the system itself.
Right. Which raises that critical question. How does supporting the choice to be a tradwife or promoting the ideology actually help change those oppressive structures, like the wage gap?
Right.
Or the unfair burden of care on women.
It seems like it might actively work against those goals, doesn't it?
Yeah.
By reinforcing the very roles feminism tries to dismantle.
That's the argument. The APA blog suggests large-scale support for tradwifery might be politically inexpedient, counterproductive to destabilizing the gendered structure and overriding those oppressive norms. Individual choices, in aggregate, can impact the bigger picture.
Wow. Okay, so we've really covered a lot of ground today, from that initial, almost idyllic image through the complexities, the personal choices, the societal pressures, the economic factors, the ideology. We've seen the fulfillment some find, but also the very real risks and the sharp critiques. It's definitely not simple.
Not at all. This deep dive shows it's way more nuanced than a quick scroll suggests. It's a whole ecosystem. Motivations, influences, consequences affecting individuals and society.
So as you, our listeners, reflect on this, maybe think about how personal choices, even private ones, ripple outwards, how they interact with these bigger structures. And ask, what does it really mean to be free to choose when history, economics, media, they all shape the options we even see? It's a question that definitely pushes us to look deeper.